Last season, Texas A&M, they could get to the red zone, but they struggled to score touchdowns. You know who didn't? Coach Collin Klein.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. College terms and conditions apply. I've got a crazy one for you today, ladies and gentlemen. A really good stat. You know, I'll pull some stats sometimes that just get me excited. This is one of those stats. So last season, a massive talking point around the Texas A&M football team was, hey, they were getting to the red zone, but they weren't scoring touchdowns. And you know who didn't have that same issue was Coach Collin Klein and Kansas State. Kansas State was getting to the red zone, and they were scoring 7, not 3. That is so huge in a football game. I mean, it was so frustrating seeing Randy Bond go out a million times a game to kick field goals when whoever it was, whether it was Connor Wigman or Max Johnson or Jalen Henderson led, or Marcel Reed led a great drive down the field, and then you stall. Listen to this stat. Last season, Texas A&M got to the red zone 61 times. They turned those 61 red zone trips into 36 touchdowns, 22 rushing touchdowns, 14 passing touchdowns, for a percentage of 59%. Okay? 59%. That means 59% of the time when Texas A&M got to the red zone, they scored a touchdown. You ready for Kansas State? Because, listen, it's Monday morning. Let's call a spade a spade. It's Monday morning, and this gets me fired up. Here we go. Kansas State was in the red zone 65 times last season, scoring 51 touchdowns. 51 touchdowns, ladies and gentlemen. 30 rushing touchdowns, 21 passing touchdowns, for a percentage of 78. 19 percentage points better than what Texas A&M did. Coach Colin Klein was getting Kansas State to the red zone and scoring touchdowns, not kicking field goals. So you say, Andrew, where does that percentage shape up to some other, good teams, good offenses, right? Where's that shape up? You know who had a really good offense? LSU. LSU's offense was dominant, one of the best we've seen really since LSU's offense with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and those great players when they won the national championship a few years ago. What was their percentage in this category, you might ask? Pretty good, 75. But not as good as Coach Colin Klein's Kansas State team. Georgia, another incredible football team. You could argue was the best football team in all college football last year, but lost to Bama. Didn't make the playoff because of it. What was their percentage? 69%. What Coach Colin Klein did last season. And this is just one phase of the game, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, not all of football comes down to scoring touchdowns in the red zone, but it is such a huge factor. There is nothing more frustrating than watching an incredible drive stall on the 16-yard line, on the 12-yard line, and you have to kick a field goal. There's nothing worse. And you know who was griping about it? Jimbo Fisher was, time and time again. All you'd hear from him in his press conferences, gotta have 7, not 3. Gotta have 7, not 3. We can't have field goals. Can't have field goals. And what continued and continued and continued to happen? Field goals. And it was annoying. It was frustrating watching great drive after great drive between the 20s, and it just stalled when it got to the scoring area. It was really frustrating. I don't think it's going to happen to Coach Klein. Seriously, because that's one of my football pet peeves is getting to the red zone and not scoring a touchdown. So, and it's funny because the stat was it was the way I was able to find these numbers was it was on the NCAA website, and it was red zone scoring. And of course, Texas A&M's red zone scoring percentage wasn't bad because, they Randy Bond did a good job kicking field goals. Normally, if you're inside the red zone, it's not too long of a field goal, and he made those field goals. So more times than not, A&M was getting points, which points are great. Yes, points are great. But that stat to me is a little bit misleading. I would take it further and do this red zone touchdown percentage. And I didn't see that stat on the NCAA website. But and like I said, you could run that number. It'd be really hard, but I'd be curious to know where Coach Collin Klein's, like I said, those LSU at 75%, Georgia at 69%. Those are two of some of the better offenses, two of the best teams in college football. And look at those percentages, not as good as Coach Collin Klein's offense. So this stat does mean a lot to me, ladies and gentlemen. And I think it should mean a lot to everybody. Looking at this, knowing Texas A&M is going to get the football to the 20, to the 10, to the 15, to the 5, and score 7 points, not 3. Think of the difference that could have made in Texas A&M's. And I know that this is the what if game. We're playing a what if game, but do that. Do that math right there. Say instead of A&M scoring touchdowns on 59% of their red zone trips, they score touchdowns on 78% of their red zone trips. How different is the record? Seriously, how different is the record? And I know that's the what if game, but this is my point. I think, with Coach Elko's got it on the other side of the football. I think everybody should feel great about the defense and the outlook of the defense. Coach Klein has got this offense on lock, and I think it's in a really, really good spot. Now, listen, there's some different things. Like, for example, we're going to have the conversation here in a minute, and are we maybe a little overconfident in the wide receiver room? There's different conversations to be had about this team, about this roster. But Coach Klein, is going to do a ton with the talent he has on this roster. I believe that. Once again, and I hate to say it, I don't think he's going to be at Texas A&M long because I think he's going to be a head coach very soon. I'm so high on what he's going to bring to Texas A&M and what he's going to bring to this offense. And I'm so excited to see what he can do. I think it's going to be just truly amazing seeing what he can do for Texas A&M's offense, for the quarterbacks and the receivers. I'm just so really excited to see what this looks like. But that stat to me, ladies and gentlemen, really stood out because it's so important to football games. That difference, 59% to 78%, is such a massive difference that can, play the role in winning and losing football games. If you're scoring touchdowns 59% of the time instead of 78% of the time, it's going to be the difference in winning those one-possession games that Texas A&M was losing last season and losing those games. So, you make that change, you fix that, and Texas A&M wins more football games. So that's a stat to me that I think is going to be a big deal. And when I did some digging on that and found that, it got me really, really excited. So now we're going to talk a little bit about this wide receiver. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I was kind of sitting and thinking about it. And, I thought to myself, you lost a lot there. Are we a little bit overconfident in this room? We're going to make the case for both sides of this argument, and we'll do that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So LinkedIn, it's a really good service. It's a place where I like how convenient that it puts together professionals looking for jobs and employers looking to hire. It really eases up that process for folks. So it's something I highly recommend. And I know many different people in the industry looking for jobs use it as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So looking at this wide receiver room, it was one. I think that maybe we are a little bit overconfident in it. Now, I'm going to make the argument for both sides of this, but I think you have to remember what you're losing. You're losing Evan Stewart, who I do think, if he puts together a good season this year, can be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. That's how talented he is. You can never convince me that Coach Fisher used him well and that he was used properly. Now, I do agree that there were some things off the field that we disagree with. He kind of not playing in this and kind of giving up on the team a little bit. No question there. There's some issues there that I disagree with. But when it comes to talent on the football field, I'm a real significant believer in what Evan Stewart can do. I do think he can be a first-round pick in the NFL draft if he, has 1,000 yards this year at his new home. And, I think what concerns me about losing Ainias Smith and Evan Stewart is you lose two different types of valuable player. So, of course, you have Evan Stewart, who is the talented guy. He's the one that was the former 5-star, going to be a really, really good player for a long time, wherever he goes at the next level. No question there. But I think Ainias Smith brings a different type of value to Texas A&M, not only in what he did in special teams, and he helped there a ton, but the other factor that played a huge role in what he did was just, it seemed like every time Texas A&M needed something, he got the job done. Every time he needed to go make a play, he made a big play for this football team. So, losing those two pieces, losing a player, Raymond Cottrell, who I think could have been a good player, he transfers. You did lose a significant amount, but you also did bring in a couple. And then on top of that, you got to remember when it comes to the high school recruiting ranks, you lose Cam Coleman, Draylon Miller. You lose a lot there as well that is going to be hard to replace. Cam Coleman is going to be a star. You lose Draylon Miller, who I think is going to be a great player. That hurts as well. So you weren't just losing players, on the roster currently. Losing a guy like Cam Coleman, I think he could have came in and helped immediately. That's how talented he is. So I think now, looking at the receiver room you've got now, my concern is the depth. I feel good about Moose, which is so funny. I was looking at some stuff on Moose yesterday. Like a lot, do people think he's going to the NFL draft? Because I've seen a lot of things about that. It was really weird. It was like, I don't know, it was weird, but because we know that is obviously not the case. But I think Moose is going to have a good year. Moose is another player. I don't. What happened last year? I don't even know how to explain that. It makes less than zero sense to me why he wasn't out there, why he wasn't playing a significant role. It was weird. I mean, it was weird. I mean, the things he can do on the football field is truly impressive. So, with Moose and then Noah Thomas, Janae Walker, I just think those three guys. Now, Noah Thomas was in and out of the lineup with injuries. You got to stay healthy. But when it comes to the depth, so those are your guys. Those are going to be the three main guys. I'm really high on Jabri Barber, the transfer from Troy. Really good numbers last year. And listen, I saw an interview. He's a confident kid. He said, "Hey, I want to come receive or have a 1,000-yard year this year at Texas A&M." So, I mean, I don't think he's coming here to play a backup role. It's funny because it's hard to find, a ton of playing time for him with these three talented guys ahead of him. But I like the tape, and he was on a good football team at Troy and he did some good things. So, I think he's your number 4 guy. And then you've got the interesting pieces. You got the freshman, Isaiah Williams, Ernest Campbell. You got Tease. You got Cyrus Allen, the other transfer receiver. So, those are kind of the guys. It's a top-heavy room to me. And then, you're going to rely on some young guys and some different stuff there that sophomores, true freshmen. So it's a room where if you have 2 injuries, I think it thins out quick. And that's kind of my concern. Those 4 names right there, Noah Thomas, Moose, Janae Walker, and Jabri Barber, I feel really good about. It's the drop-off after that concerns me. So I think that perhaps we're a little bit overconfident in this room. I do think that is a possibility, but I just think we're forgetting who Moose Muhammad is because of what happened last season. But the numbers that he is capable of putting together is impressive, and I think that you're going to see him do that this year. I'm kind of anxious to see what he can do because I do think he's an NFL player, and I don't think that what happened last year showed that. So hopefully, if he is able to put together better numbers this year, he can put himself in a position to get drafted the following year. Because the catches he's able to make are really cool. I mean, how many one-handed catches have we seen that dude make throughout his career? And then, Janae Walker as well as a guy, I think that he can potentially even be the number 1 in this offense. He really stepped up last year. He looked good, doing different things late in the year. So I think he can do some things too. Noah Thomas is a guy, I think that being banged up and in and out of the lineup kind of hurt the numbers that he could have put together last year. But I think if he stays healthy, he can be a touchdown machine with his height and his size. He's a big guy. I think he can score a lot of touchdowns. So I think you could argue perhaps we're a little overconfident in this wide receiver room, but I think that the overconfidence it has to do with the top heaviness or the top guys. If you start having guys go down with injuries, then it's going to become concerning. But the guys at the top, you feel good about. And then you got to remember, you're going to get a second transfer portal window here. So if the coaching staff goes through, early parts of the year and don't feel great about where the receiver room's at, they will have that second window to try and bring in some more guys. So, I don't think this room now we could be having a different conversation in a few months is what I'm saying. But right now I'm confident in this room, but I do think you are a couple injuries away from seeing some problems with this wide receiver room. So that's where my head is at with that position group. And now we're going to talk about Texas A&M's win over the Florida Gators. Felt like a must win with what you got coming up. It was a big win. We'll talk about it, who played well, and then what is coming up for the Aggies. We'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. The Super Bowl, it's an interesting one. We've been betting against the Chiefs for weeks now and losing time and time again. So do you stick with that? Do you flip and bet on – do we keep sticking with that, bet the 49ers, or do you flip and bet on the Chiefs? It's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a fun Super Bowl, though. I'm anxious to see how this one plays out. There's a lot of players that are easy to root for on the 49ers side of things. Chiefs, it's harder because they've won a lot. They've kind of taken on that Brady supervillain role. A lot of players I'd like to see win on the 49ers, Debo, McCaffrey, Kittle. So a lot to root for in the Super Bowl. FanDuel has so many ways to end the season with a dub or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl, but you can also bet on which players are going to score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and a ton more. New customers join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. So this win on the hardwood was a significant one, and it was a must win. I've said it time and time again. This felt like a game you could not lose. As the season kind of got uglier and uglier with some losses, we had gotten to a point where you kind of said to yourself, okay, you got to start winning some of these games. And early in this one, you kind of went, ooh, Texas A&M was behind 40-34 at the half. This is a Florida team that just beat Kentucky in Rupp Arena. So, it was a little bit concerning, but you get the job done. And at the end of the day, it was a win you had to get. It was a win that you needed. If you lose this game, I don't know how you find a path to kind of fix stuff. You're now 4-4 in conference play. You got a winnable game coming up against Missouri on the road, of course, but a winnable game and a must win. If you take care of business there, you are 5-4 with the Tennessee Volunteers coming to town. You already took the manhood of the Kentucky Wildcats in Reed Arena a couple weeks ago. Can you do that to Tennessee? It'll be interesting. But I think that you go in to that Tennessee game on a winning streak. We know Reed Arena will be pumped up. We know folks are going to be fired up for that ball game, especially if you're coming in on a couple game winning streak. So, I'm kind of anxious to see if this team can go on the road and take down a Missouri team that is not good. I still believe that they're winless in SEC play. I think that they played Vandy. They had their shot at a win and lost. Let me double check on that. Yes, they are 0-9 in SEC play. So this is a very bad basketball team. You've already beaten them at home. Now you got to go to their place and beat them again. If you want to, we've talked about it. We are getting to a point where getting into the NCAA tournament is getting more and more concerning. This is a game you cannot lose if you want to go to the NCAA tournament. You have to, it's not even debatable. You have to win this basketball game. Same thing with that Vandy game on the road after the Tennessee game. So there are some wins still left on the board for this Texas A&M team. And then maybe you could win a game or two in the SEC tournament. Coach Buzz tends to do well in Nashville. So, if you find a way to maybe win a game or two you're not supposed to. Now, listen, you got to play Tennessee twice still. You got to go to Bama. This schedule is not going to ease up. So you have to go. You have South Carolina coming to town, who is likely going to be ranked when the AP poll comes out later today. So you've got 4. Let me see this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of your next 7 games. Assuming South Carolina's ranked, which we think they're going to be ranked, 4 of those games are going to be against ranked teams. So it's going to be a tough stretch. It's going to be a really tough stretch, but you do have games against Arkansas, Vandy, and Missouri, who are, I think, the 3 worst teams in the SEC. You have to win those 3. You have to win those 3. And if you could find a way to steal a couple of those ranked games, it's not going to be easy, but you do get to play a couple of them at home. Steal a couple of those, and then you get to those 3 games in March. You got to go to Georgia. I think that's a winnable game. You host Mississippi State, winnable game. Go to Ole Miss. Once again, tough but winnable game. There are a lot of games that Texas A&M can win. Question is, will they? They have to shoot the ball well. They have to keep doing well what they've been doing. Boots was great in this win over the Florida Gators. He led the Aggies and led the game with 26 points. 10 of 16 from the field. He was, what was he from the field or from the 3-point line? He was 2 or 3 from deep, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. It was interesting, a game of the 2 best offensive rebounding teams in college hoops, and they kind of kept each other off the offensive glass. Florida had 11 offensive rebounds. Texas A&M had 13, which is a fun kind of narrative in this ball game. You hold a guy in Walter Clayton who lit it up in Rupp Arena to only 8 points, 2 of 8 shooting, 2 of 6 from 3. So, I think they game planned well for a player like him who was coming in hot. And then the only concern from this game for me, and it's going to be continuous, is you got to make your free throws. Texas A&M continues to not make their free throws. 15 of 24 in this game from the line, 62.5%. You're not going to win basketball games if you aren't making the free ones. Have to make them. It's getting concerning. You will lose basketball games because of that. I mean, think about that. You win this game by a point. If you make 5 more of those, it's a huge deal. So, I mean, they're called free throws for a reason. I know that is the most generic saying of all time, but it's genuine. You got to make them. They are free points that are being handed to you. So, you got to make your free throws. But this Texas A&M team can go on a run, but it will take beating some really good teams. They got to continue to get better and better scoring the basketball. And if they do that, I do still believe this team can string some wins together and make some magic happen. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here. Hope everybody has a great rest of their Monday, and we will see you tomorrow.